Welcome to Labor on the Job. I'm the host, Steve Zeltzer. Tonight we're going to be looking at the condition of workers in the biotech industry. This is a new industry that employs hundreds of thousands of workers in the United States. And we're going to be looking at what has happened to health and safety protection and oversight of this industry. And in particular, the case of David Bell, who worked at the Agraquest company in Davis, California. Labor on the Job has covered other industries, and the issue of health and safety protection for working people in these industries is a vital concern, but also the effect of biotechnology on the community at large. So joining us this evening is David Bell. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you, Steve, for having me.
So David, you were a science student and you were studying biotechnology and chemistry. Why don't you talk about how you got into that field?
Into science? Well, originally I started off as a pre-med student, biology, like a lot of people do, and then just ended up as a general science major with a chemistry minor.
And this was at Chico State?
I started at Chico and then later transferred to Sacramento State.
And you were then looking for a job. You were close to graduation?
Yeah, I was about 3 courses away from graduating before I started looking for a standard 1-year laboratory job in the field, which is kind of what's required to break into the industry. You generally need 1 year's experience.
And Davis is a major area for biotechnology?
In the Sacramento region, yes. There's like maybe 3 biotech employers in Sacramento and the remainder in Davis and Vacaville for that area.
So you heard about this job. You heard about it through the school?
No, actually, I just started randomly faxing the top 20 biotech companies in my area with my resume to, throw out some hooks and see if I could find a halfway decent job to get my 1-year experience.
Mm-hmm. So you got a call back?
Yeah, I got kind of lucky. They called me back, put me through an interview with about 6 of their employees, and I passed with flying colors.
What kind of questions did they ask you?
It's been a long time to come up with those things. It was the most extensive interviewing process I've ever done.
It was like about science and technology.
About how I got along with the people, whether or not I was going to click with this environment of people, this culture of people.
I see. So you started working at this company. What was the culture like at the company, the biotech company, startup?
It was pretty good. I mean, we had a lot of college interns and a couple high school students that worked there. A lot of us were younger. We all got into it because we wanted to contribute to the green industry, to come up with natural, environmentally friendly products. It was the big hook that got us into it because it was supposed to be sustainable agriculture by using biopesticides instead of these organic or the chemical-based stuff.
That has harmed a lot of people, chemical.
Ultimately, it looks like they have throughout the years. A lot of people argue about whether it's harmed people or not because there would be the, the benefit of having people with food on their table versus starvation. So it's really hard to justify one way or the other.
So you began to work at this company, and what exactly did this company do?
They would go and scour the world around and bring back dirt and rotting plant, decaying material, feces, you name it, anything, and culture it at random in petri dishes. And then they would take the pure culture and run it through a screen to see if it might kill a plant pathogen or maybe a pest of plants. And then if it showed promise, then it would further be upped into more trials until finally they might consider registering it if it was really a promising candidate.
So these were living organisms that they were trying to get?
Oh, absolutely viable, yeah. Yeah, that's the whole thing is when you put a biological on a product, you don't really just spray the chemical of the biological. You expect the biological to be viable and propagate and actually grow on the plants. That's how the inhibitory effect works.
So it's kind of exciting what you can discover.
It's cutting edge. It's definitely cutting edge. I mean, you're culturing and growing species of bacteria and fungi that maybe nobody's ever cataloged before.
So was there any concern about health and safety or some of these new fungus and bacteria that was being brought in that might be dangerous?
There was never any discussion of it. They used biosafety level 2 containment hoods, and that was for most of the transferring Lab safety, there was minimal discussion. To be honest, I'm better protected when I mow my yard than I was when I worked in that laboratory.
Now, what kind of better protection are you talking about that would be important to have
Well, I have
for a
hay
biotech
fever.
worker?
I have hay fever, so like when I mow my yard, I wear a mask. I wear a standard respiratory dust mask, just keep the pollen out. We didn't wear that in the laboratory.
So there were no masks?
No.
And these products were out there, or these organisms were just on the table, or how did they contain them?
One employee wore a mask, the rest of us didn't.
Who was that?
Brian Campbell, one of the coworkers that worked in the formulation laboratory.
Was it his own mask, or was the company providing him that mask?
Somehow he had a HEPA mask, one of the full ones with the two things on.
So he was wearing this big mask,
the only guy in the company wearing
the
a
HEPA mask, and no
running
one else
around the
was.
hallways past us wearing nothing.
Really? So were there any signs there of biohazards or be careful or something like that?
No, in fact, I actually wanted to put some up at one point, and I was told I couldn't do it because the company president said it would be bad for the public tours of the laboratory, that it would look bad to the investors.
And who was the company president?
Pam Marrone.
Pam Marrone. Now, this Pam Marrone has been written about a lot. If people go to Google, they'll see that she's a very entrepreneur leader in biotechnology, and she likes to get products out and that kind of thing. Where did she come from?
Pam apparently originally came from back east with a degree in entomology, and then somehow she just pops up in Davis, California. I don't know entirely how she got there.
But before that, she worked for Monsanto?
Mm-hmm.
And what did she do at Monsanto?
I would have no clue.
Okay. Because I think I've done some research on this, and she was in charge of their genetic engineering for organic pesticides.
Oh, did she?
And that's exactly what I think this company, Agraquest, was doing.
Well, she ended up, I know before she started Agraquest, she was working over at Novo Nordisk Entotech. And that was definitely one of the things that they were doing through patent searches also, was genetically modified organisms.
So in other words, they would genetically modify different organisms, living organisms that you got, that were gotten around the world, fungus and and bacteria, to kill insects. Is that the idea?
Well, Novo Nordisk Entotech was doing the genetic modification. I think the idea behind Agraquest was to actually find a species that had more of the concentrated quantity of the active ingredient that you were looking for, that was naturally bred. However, I really don't know what Pam had in that laboratory, to be honest. I've been kind of
And you
wondering
became kind of concerned that things were being brought in improperly at some point?
Yeah, I did question them one time when I saw them bring a suitcase from, I believe, a flight in Chile or Mexico. I definitely questioned that.
Why did you question that?
Because I'm not used to watching somebody unpack their luggage and they just pull a giant bag of dirt in a cellophane bag out of there. That's pretty unusual for luggage.
And you don't know where that dirt came from, or?
It came from the trip, the international trip.
I see. So somebody had brought in dirt.
Oh,
from
absolutely.
A trip.
And I questioned them, and when I asked them about that, they started laughing and told me they do it all the time.
So is this illegal? Illegally, can you bring in dirt from other countries?
Absolutely illegal unless you have an importation permit.
And why is that?
Because it's considered smuggling. California is very protective of the crops, and we're very specific about people bringing in a foreign pathogen that might destroy, for instance, the entire grape crop or the orange crop, which could cost California billions of dollars in industry and receipts.
So they want to protect our agriculture industry. And also, I mean, who knows what's in it? It could infect other people or harm people.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's the same reason why when you come into California from other states, why you go through quarantine zones and there's agriculture inspection stations looking for Mediterranean fruit fly or the apple maggot or any backyard produce that wasn't professionally grown, and they'll absolutely confiscate it at the airports or at the checkpoints coming in, and they'll burn it. It will be incinerated for the protection of the California agriculture industry.
So this activity that you saw at Agraquest was, in your mind, illegal and very concerning to you.
Well, at the time I saw it and observed it, I was an employee, and I naturally assumed that there would be a permit, that the company would have gone through the proper paperwork and proceedings to actually bring this thing in. And given the amount of times that they have done it and repeatedly done it, one would naturally assume that it was completely above board on the level.
You thought this company was a above board company and doing things properly
Mm-hmm.
when you worked there.
Absolutely, I thought they were.
Now, so you began to raise some health and safety concerns. Did you ever go to OSHA or health and safety about some of these things?
When I was working there, I never went to OSHA. A couple years after being sick from working there, I finally broke down and called OSHA because I was extremely suspicious.
And you people were in these rooms with this bacteria and fungus, and were there any incidents where people got sick?
Well, the week I got ill, I was told that about 15 or so other workers also got ill that week too. See, I got ill and ended up going out for 5 weeks between the surgery and the recovery
what year
period.
was this?
I first got ill in January of 1999.
Mm-hmm. And what were these symptoms?
It was horrible. I was at work, and it was like a Monday or a Tuesday, and this purulent pus just kept coming out. And the more I blew it out, the more it would keep producing. I literally could not blow it out fast enough. So come around noon at that point, I checked out of work, told them I was sick, and I went straight to a doctor.
And what did the doctor say?
Doctor said I needed to immediately see an ear, nose, and throat specialist and put me on an antibiotic.
And you went to the hospital?
Now I went to the little like triage doc in the box thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to doc in the box first. And then I ended up with the real ear, nose, and throat doctor come Friday of that week.
And were you off work?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There was no way to go back. The symptoms were getting worse. Finally, the purulent drainage went into a fever, body aches, chills, and this whole side of my face was numb from the lower eyelid to the top lip.
So
I couldn't
you
feel it.
You
It
had a
was-
serious infection then.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been told by 3 physicians that I would have died had I not have sought immediate medical care. They actually told me I was lucky as a biology major. That was the only thing that saved my life. They told me most people would have gone to sleep and had never woke up.
I see. So what was it that you had?
That's a really good question. To this date, I still do not know.
So but you had a very serious infection inside your body.
Mm-hmm. I asked the physician to culture it upon surgery and told her that it very well could have been my employer, and I didn't have any proof, so I wanted to know what we were treating and cutting
So
out
you
of
just
me.
wanted a record, what it was, and also to find out what was in your body.
Being that I was a bio major, I wanted not just a record, I wanted them to culture it and run it through an antibiotic susceptibility testing so they could actually prescribe an antibiotic, be it IV or oral, that was actually going to kill this thing. Instead of just randomly doing the shotgun approach where they just pick a broad spectrum antibiotic and say, let's get rid of it.
So the medical treatment had problems with it because they didn't do the culture.
Absolutely.
And what was the doctor who refused to do the culture?
Well, no, she didn't refuse. Later, before she did another surgery, I asked her about that first one, and she told me she had forgotten.
And what system was this? What health system was this?
Sutter Healthcare System, Dr. Nancy Applebatt.
So she said she forgot to do a culture even though you had asked her to do the culture, and even though this had something to do with something in your body.
Even though she knew it was potentially a workers' compensation issue and was heading in that direction.
Do you think that's maybe why she didn't want to do a culture?
You know, it's an interesting question. The fact that Pam Marrone would have known Nancy Applebatt from the Sacramento Valley Women's Chamber of Commerce, and also the fact that Pam Marrone sits on the board of that hospital system.
The Sutter Hospital System in that region.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question.
Well, that's quite a frightening thing, that your life and what's inside your body is being, they're not really looking to find out what the causes are because they want to possibly contain their liability in workers' comp.
Really to be disgusting, because when I took microbiology classes at Sacramento State, you know, we were told cut and dry, this stuff is extremely dangerous. And we were told that in no way should we ever really be concerned about it, because if something unusual happened, like the instance that happened with me, that the doctors would call the CDC and the CDC would take over, and they would culture it, and they would find out what it was and actually eliminate it and save the worker's life. Somehow my thing just kind of fell through the cracks, and I literally damn near died from it.
And the CDC is Center for Disease Control.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what would have happened if they'd done a culture and found out that indeed some of this fungus or material, bacteria, was in your body? What would have been the effect?
I think the most immediate effect would have been that I probably would have had an absolute recovery, because they would have known what it was and it could have been treated. So I would have gotten better. I don't think things would have dragged on for 6, 7, 8 years as it had been with repeat surgeries. I think that had they have done the proper thing in the first place, that I would have had one surgery, one antibiotic, probably an IV, and that would have been it.
And how many surgeries did you have?
I've had 4 surgeries and at least 30 or 40 antibiotics, 3 or 4 antifungals, over two years of IVIG blood infusions. I've been through horrific things.
So you were in the hospital. This was your first hospital visit, and then you went back to work?
No. The original physician told me I could probably go back to work within 2 weeks. I called my supervisor and told her that I didn't think it was really wise me coming back into an unknown pathogen laboratory once my head had just been scraped out like a cantaloupe. They agreed, and so I stayed away for over 4 weeks.
And then what happened?
Went back to work. Went absolutely back to work.
And how were you treated when you went back to work? Was there special
Oh,
treatment
I got
for you?
a card in a beautiful Japanese flower arrangement, and nobody told me everybody got sick while I was gone. Nobody told me they had to lock the lab because everybody called in sick. It was just kind of clueless when I show back up. I get back there and they say, "Wow, I guess everybody must have had the flu, Dave." Okay, the flu. That kind of explains it. Normally it doesn't hit 100% of one whole demographics, but okay, the flu, maybe.
So was this reported to OSHA or reported to the government that there had been a sick situation in which people got sick en masse at the laboratory?
No, in fact, the physician never reported to anybody, which was actually an illegal act. She was required by law to report it. As soon as I told her it was even a possibility, she was required by law to report it.
So she ignored the rules and the law.
Mm-hmm. Which is pretty standard, apparently, I understand, from physicians and worker compensation. I mean, when you go to a doctor, they want to know who they can bill. And if they find out it's a worker compensation case, or potentially, they think that they might not get paid for their services for 3, 5 years if they ever get paid at all. So the physicians are into getting their paychecks, so they set it off on private insurance as quick as they can and try to steer it away from the worker comp system entirely.
So you discovered that that there had been a large number of people getting sick when you were gone, and how did you find that out?
Later in the year, I had a discussion with the receptionist, and she's the only one who took the phone calls for all the sick people, so she's the only one who actually knew.
And she told you this?
FYI, David, everybody got sick. I had to lock the lab.
So you went back to work and you found out that this incident had taken place, and then you continued working there. What happened while you were working there?
While I was working there, we moved into another facility. We moved from the first laboratory into the second laboratory, which was, the second laboratory was actually constructed mostly for containment in a biology laboratory. It was a much better design for a building and for safety with double door protection and stuff like that.
So the first laboratory was in a residential neighborhood?
Yeah, the first laboratory was in a residential neighborhood. It was more like a converted doctor's office or a chemical a laboratory, like a chemistry class laboratory, a biological laboratory and a chemistry laboratory, 2 entirely different beasts. Had an autoclave, had a break room right next to the autoclave room. We could never use the break room. We weren't allowed to really use the break room because the founder, Pamela, was always having tours in there. So another thing is we had tea time in the laboratory every day. We have a hot pathogen laboratory, and we have condoned food and drink required of employees to even contribute into the money for it, right there in the lab sink.
And you also discovered that children of employees were coming into this laboratory as well?
Oh yeah, yeah. On weekends and stuff, some people would come to work. Family members of Agraquest employees, high school students. We had a high school dishwasher. Later I learned that no high school students are allowed in this kind of laboratory. This kind of laboratory is supposed to have locked access, double door, sign a log when you walk into it, which is completely different from what we had. I mean, anybody could walk in the laboratory. There were tours daily, and we had high school students running around.
So the stringent regulations were not being enforced in this startup?
Not at all. Not at all. But they're not stringent regulations. When you track down the BLMB, as it's called, most of these regulations are actually worded as recommendations. It's interesting, but the wording is recommended.
So they're not really requirements?
No.
When dealing with these kind of material. Now, so you went back to work, and then what happened? You were taking stuff out, barrels of this stuff? And
well, I was still pretty ill when I went back to work. I was still vomiting almost daily. And every time I would kind of bend partway over, liquid would just start running out of my nose.
So you were still sick?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But, you know, I was told I could go back to work, so I tried to go back to work.
Uh-huh.
You know,
and this was still not a workers' comp case?
No. No. If I would have known a respirator was required for the job or even necessary, then I could have told my physician that. And my physician would have immediately said, well, you just had your septum fixed and your nose scooped out. You know, when I went back to work, I couldn't even wear a mask on my face. If I had to, I couldn't have worn one. There was no way, because of the pressure on the bridge of my nose, it would have just hurt like hell.
So the doctor sent you back to work?
Yeah.
Knowing that you worked in a biotech laboratory?
Absolutely.
And what doctor was this?
Appelblatt.
Appelblatt. And is she still with the Sutter chain?
Oh, yeah, my guess is she's still with Sacramento Ear, Nose, and Throat.
I see. So that seems a very serious concern, that she would send you back to a biotech laboratory knowing that you had still serious symptoms that were causing you problems.
True. However, Dr. Appelblatt just also told me that she saved my life. So even though the physician sends you back to work, are you going to doubt the physician when they just told you they saved your life? So at this point, I have absolute trust and faith in this doctor, because surely she's the one who just saved my life.
She told you would have died unless they'd gotten you in there.
Which was later confirmed by several other physicians also. So
you went back to work, and where were they taking some of this toxic material? You were being told to dump it places, or?
Oh, yeah, I mean, occasionally things would get dumped out back in the building. Big drums, old fermentation runs, stuff that's too big to fit in the autoclave. We've got to get rid of it somewhere. So if you
by fermentation runs, you mean these barrels had things that were growing inside them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in nutrient broth. Yeah.
In nutrient broth. So what was growing inside them?
Well, the biopesticide industry is very much like the beer industry, okay? We get this stuff and we have it in a petri dish and it's in this pure form, and then we do what's a shake flask scale up, to where it moves and it slowly goes up in volume till it gets to big, huge fermenters. Very much like you make beer. It's fermented product. So if you were going to think of beer, that's what we would call the fermentation run.
And so these barrels, you were asked to take them and dump them where?
Behind the building.
What was behind the building?
A little space before you got to the next offices, and a concrete culvert.
So it was just ground, or
at
cement?
The end of the concrete, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was told to pour bleach in it first, so I poured a lot of bleach in it. 2.5 gallons of bleach.
So you poured bleach. I guess this was the to make secure that it would kill what was in there. Was that the bleach? The reason for the bleach?
10% bleach will kill virtually everything.
Is this in the rules of the biotech industry or the EPA?
Oh.
You dump it in your backyard and put in some bleach?
When you're cutting edge, you got to do what you got to do.
By cutting edge, what does that mean? You're a startup and don't have a lot of money? Is that what it means? Or
they had quite a bit of money. They did have plenty of investors. There was no shortage of investors. Yeah, you're breaking new ground. What are you going to do with something when you have to reuse the barrel? You've got to kill what's inside. If you know what you know will kill it's usually bleach.
I see. So that's usually pretty sure thing as far as putting bleach in. It'll kill the microorganisms.
Well, it's cheaper than ethanol, because you can put ethanol in it too.
But that would cost more money.
Right.
I see. So you were asked to take these barrels down, and then what happened? Did you get sick from any of these, taking these barrels out and dumping them?
That's an interesting question because that's all timed within 7 days of me ended up at the hospital the first time. I don't know if that barrel caused it. I don't know if it was something else in the laboratory. Opening up that barrel was a coincidence of when everybody got ill.
Not just yourself, but other people got ill.
The whole lab got ill that week.
When that barrel was opened up?
Yeah.
So there may have been something in that barrel that contaminated not just you, but everyone there.
It could have been. Very possible. I mean, the barrel was labeled Germany.
It was labeled Germany?
I think it was
Which
AQ153, which would be the 153rd candidate that they had of something, because that's how all the experimental runs are labeled.
And what did that mean?
Just meant it was one of the first things they ever tried to grow.
I see.
153, right there in the beginning.
I see. So people got sick. So you went back to work, and what happened when you went back to work?
Well, they moved into the second facility, which was a bit of a problem because since OSHA was never called to inspect the first facility, now we're in the second beautifully designed facility. So
they put some money into this and designing a facility for a biotech plant.
True, but now we're not at the scene of the crime anymore. We're in the new building where everything's perfect.
I see.
Oh, hopefully perfect.
And what happens there?
What happens there is apparently you lay off an employee, give them a month's severance pay of $1,441, and then later say you fired the guy.
So you got laid off there.
We got laid off and then later told I was fired.
Is this while you were sick?
Oh yeah, I was still throwing up daily.
Did they know that?
Uh-huh.
Pam Marrone personally knew that?
I told my supervisor I was still throwing up. Next thing you know, I was laid off next week.
So you were still sick, you were throwing up, you told your supervisor you were sick, and then you got laid off, and they gave you $1,440 severance.
Severance pay.
Severance.
Which would be standard when you're laid off. To give somebody severance pay is perfectly normal when they're laid off. I thought nothing of it.
And what did they say to you?
Good luck finding another job.
I see. So did they say what the reason was you were being laid off?
They said my position had ended because it had lost funding.
I see. So your position lost funding, so they were laying you off.
Which didn't really raise a red flag in my mind because I was hired for a 6 to a 12-month duration anyways. So that fit right in the 10-month window. Month severance pay made sense to me.
So you were going to be on your way, except you were still sick.
Oh, I was absolutely still sick. Got another job, had to quit that because I was throwing up on the way to that job every day. Every day on the way from Sacramento to Fairfield, I'm pulling over twice on the side of the road to puke in both directions. Not fun.
So you were seriously ill.
Uh-huh.
But you really didn't believe it was because of what had happened at the company at that point.
Well, I had no proof. They told me that everything I worked with there was benign, couldn't harm a fly. You know, these guys are PhDs. I'm working on a bachelor's degree at that point before I got it. You got to trust someone, so you trust the masters and the PhDs. So you would think that the PhDs could be honest and they're ethical and would actually lay it all on the line and level with you, be honest.
So these scientists told you, don't worry, you're not sick because of working here.
Oh yeah, they told me that, again, it was benign, it couldn't hurt a fly, is what my supervisor told me.
And who was that?
Her name is Laura Cunningham-Hilbig. She works over at Bayer in Berkeley now. Apparently she's got 3 or 4 of the Agraquest employees over there. She won't let me talk to any of them on the phone. I've tried.
I see. So they basically tried to say what you had, even though they knew you were thrown up and seriously ill, had nothing to do with working at this biotech company.
Yeah, it turned out to be a cover-up. Later that year, I requested a copy of my employee file. That turned into a fiasco. I finally got a copy of my employee file more than 4 years later after I subpoenaed it.
So you had to go to a lawyer.
The worker comp lawyer got it. It took a court subpoena to get a file that I'm supposed to be able to just request via mail, which it did, offered to pay copying cost, delivery cost, never heard a word from them, they never delivered it.
So you filed a workers' comp complaint.
Finally.
When did you file that?
About 3-4 years later, after I discovered a research article about one of the company's main species. Only the article wasn't recent. It started in 1969 and it was listed under the heading of papers that have changed occupational medicine. They happened to be reprinted in 2002, I believe it was.
And you read this article, and what shocked you about this article?
It told me of factory workers that were working around Bacillus subtilis, that they had got near the exhaust ports, or other people that were even in adjoining buildings, and they were having severe asthma, nasal polyps, symptoms quite similar to what happened to me at Agraquest.
And it clicked.
It clicked that I had just been completely deceived.
You had been lied to.
Oh, I literally felt like a horse's ass, to be honest.
Well, you believed in them.
I
and you
absolutely
trusted them.
Until the minute I read that article. And then I started researching this article, and I'd come up with 100 other references that were after 1969 that all went in and quoted this person again. So basically, the Bacillus subtilis produces an enzyme, some proteolytic enzymes called subtilisins, and there's about 18 of them that are known to man, and they cause severe allergic reaction. Flint quoted it as being a potent allergen.
So these were dangerous, toxic substances for human beings that you had to be careful about.
Well, it's on the Toxic Substance Control Act. This one was listed as an allergen. But then once I found out about this one, which was the company's main product, was Bacillus subtilis, and I figured, you know, if they lied to me about this, then what else have they lied about at this point?
And what products does this company have, Agraquest, that go to the public?
Well, I believe there's Serenade, which is a Bacillus subtilis, and then there's a Rhapsody, which again is a Bacillus subtilis, and I'm not too sure if that's mixed in with Bacillus thuringiensis. And then the third product was called Laginidium giganteum, or Laginex AS, which was my primary product. And apparently they pulled that off the market.
And these products were sold where? At Walmarts or hardware stores, or where are these products sold?
Serenade actually ended up being shelved at Walmart eventually.
But they're widely dispersed.
Oh, it's worldwide.
It's worldwide. And so you filed a workers' comp complaint, and you get a runaround by the company on getting your paperwork.
Yeah, I filed a comp complaint. I called every government and state agency I could find at the time, lodged complaints with them also.
Who did you file complaints with?
Well, we started with OSHA, and then we went to the USDA, and then went to APHIS, and then went to the Office of Spill Prevention and Response. I'm sure there's a couple others, but virtually everyone I could call.
So these are federal and state and local. There's a Department of Pesticides. Did you contact them? Or?
Well, Department of Pesticide Regulation is almost pointless to contact because company employees work there.
Is that legal?
Well, it's not supposed to be, but now there are things set up with the government where people can be consultants on the side. So now they can work with regulatory agencies and work for the companies that are also in the process of getting their things regulated.
So this incestuous relationship between employees at Agraquest and government agencies like the Department of Pesticide, do you think that this affected the lack of regulation of Agraquest and other similar kind of biotech companies?
When you have somebody in the regulatory agency and they're actually working in the registration department for new applications, yeah, I think there's going to be a severe conflict of interest because the companies are getting inside information as to what the government agencies are up to, and even potentially what their competitors are up to that they've submitted to the government agency also.
And Pam Marrone is very well known. She's kind of a celebrity figure in the biotech industry as an innovator, and she markets new products. You initially, when you started working there, thought that she was doing great work and it was an exciting place to work. What did you come to see about Pam Marrone?
She's dishonest. That she is an extremely dishonest individual that apparently is not concerned for employees. So if you're not concerned for your employees, then how could you claim that you're concerned about the world or the environment or anything? You know, if your house isn't in order.
So she had a kind of a double standard then, what you're saying, you know. On the one hand, she talked about helping people and using organic pesticides to help people, but in reality, in your experience, it was quite a different story.
I believe I got sick at work, and somehow it became personal with Pam to try and grind me in the ground and not slow down registration of any of her products, which could have been implicated in making me ill.
Now, another incident took place. You were accused by an employee there of being threatening him, and they tried to get a restraining order against you. What was that all about?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he says I threatened him over cable TV. And that was around the same time that I also requested that employee file. And that's why I requested the employee file. Around the time that the year anniversary of me being laid off was up, Mr. Campbell put up a restraining order on me, which basically prevented me from contacting the company because the restraining order, the temporary restraining order, was put up as a blanket deal. So I couldn't contact the company, couldn't contact other company employees, couldn't ask questions. Never had any idea that apparently at that time I had been fired, so I couldn't even get into a wrongful termination lawsuit, which I had absolute right on. However, they had a restraining order on me at the time, so now I couldn't even get.
And what did the restraining order say?
Oh, God. It said I molested and harassed the individual.
Who was that?
My coworker, Brian Campbell, the one that wore the respirator at work while nobody else did.
So he accused you of threatening him.
He accused me of it, but he had an entirely different story when it went to court.
What happened?
When it went to court, he told me that he was receiving hang-up phone calls. And I laughed at him and said, "You've got to be joking me. I'm not going to pay this gentleman's attorney bills because he gets hang-up phone calls."
So do you think somebody put him up to it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. 4 years later, when we got the employee file, there was a script for what Brian was supposed to say and the questions he was supposed to ask me at the hearing. The whole thing was in my employee file. Everything was in my employee file except the order from the judge dismissing the whole thing and quashing the temporary restraining order because Mr. Campbell couldn't show any justification for even having a temporary restraining order on me.
So this was a rigged deal.
Oh, absolutely.
Basically to threaten you and to try to silence you.
Well, I think what they were hoping was that they were going to get it on me and then I was going to come knocking on the door for the business and they could have me get arrested.
So they could actually put you away in jail.
I believe so.
And then be done with you.
Probably. Accuse me of something I never did in Yolo County.
So you were getting sick, you continued to get sick from these infections, from sinus infections, and how were you getting your medical care taken care of?
Well, originally it started going through on my wife's employer, which was Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Mm-hmm.
And then later they finally reversed all that and ended up starting to put it through on Medicare.
So you had to apply for Medicare.
This is where it's interesting. I was already considered a disabled worker before I worked at Agraquest because I was on Medicare through part of college. When I worked at Agraquest, I was working there to get off of Medicare. I was on my trial work period. Injured worker returning to work, which Medicare tells me nobody ever does. Normally they actually get on the system and never get off. I got sick returning to work.
I see.
They actually made one of the first workers to ever return to the workforce ill during his trial work period.
I see. So you went back on Medicare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what kind of money was spent on taking care of your health at that point?
Thousands. The copays were thousands. It was absolutely astronomical. I spent more on copays than I ever made at Agraquest.
So we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Out of pocket, hundreds of thousands of dollars is the cash value of the medical care. And just the cash value of the blood infusions alone is about $300,000. What I get billed versus the cash value are two different things because your copays are different.
I see. So you still wanted to find out what was inside your body.
Oh, absolutely.
And how did you eventually find that out?
By the variety of cultures. We still have no absolute definitive answer. The original surgery had a pathology sample taken, which I demanded that they try and culture and figure out what it was in the first place. They let it get destroyed. We had absolute sample of the real thing. They let it get destroyed. So now all I can go on are the cultures and the blood work that come out of me now.
And you went to the Mayo Clinic to find this out?
I went to the Mayo Clinic because a physician back in Sacramento told me the ring of doctors at Sutter had been deceiving me. And I asked him, I go, why? I go, can you see the hole in my nose, in my septum? And he says, yeah, you got to be blind not to see it. You see, Dr. Appelblatt had never mentioned that there was a perforated septum from the first surgery, only the mention of the CAT scans that said it was there. And then those were actually missing out of her chart. I had to go to the radiologist to get the copies of the CAT scans and the readings.
So this sounds like a very convoluted cover-up. I mean, or that they were doing all kinds of things to prevent you from really learning what was happening with yourself.
Somehow I got stuck in their dirty little circle, which is mostly UC Davis graduates and UC Davis physicians and Sutter healthcare
Is there a
physicians.
connection between UC Davis and Sutter?
A lot of people go to work for Sutter out of UC Davis because UC Davis is a very reputable medical school in the Sacramento Valley area.
And Pam Marrone apparently was on the chair of a committee, Biotech and Agriculture Committee of the University of California.
Well, she was on that, but she also went to the UC Davis School of Management where she met a lot of her companions, the people that would contribute money or that she would pull favors from.
I see. So there was kind of this relationship between Pam Marrone, the biotech company Agraquest, and UC.
Mm-hmm. Pam Marrone couldn't survive in Davis with Agraquest without having a partnership with UC Davis. It's impossible.
So was UC Davis aware of this, or are they aware of this?
What, that I had become ill over there?
Yeah.
I think that there's such a large facility that they probably are oblivious to what happened.
Do you think they're concerned, the University of California, Davis, about the dangers, potential dangers in the biotech industry?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
UC Davis is a school. It's not some humanitarian organization. They're a school. This is what they do.
Do you think it might have to do with the fact that there's corporate control of the university?
That could be a little bit of it, where the money string goes to, the money chain. But again, it's a school. I mean, they're apparently not there to teach ethics. They're there to conduct science. And we're going to let future generations pick up the pieces from the science that goes bad in our generation.
So this Mayo Clinic did a culture of you, and what did you discover about the products that were in your body, or the material that was in your body?
Mayo Clinic didn't do cultures. Mayo Clinic ran some blood work.
I see.
Some very definitive blood work. The only thing that really came up unusual out of the Mayo Clinic blood work was the presence of histoplasmosis yeast or some antibody to it in my blood, which was very unusual. Histoplasma capsulatum is not endemic to the California area. It's largely in the Ohio River Valley area, Indianapolis. This is normally where they have the outbreaks. So here I am living in California for most of my life, haven't returned to Ohio in 10 or 15 years, and yet I'm coming up positive for something that's in Ohio River Valley only. It's a strange turn of events.
Did you find any patented material in your body?
Pardon?
Patented material. Was there any material in your body that the company had patented that they were developing?
Virtually everything that the cultures, all the cultures but one so far have come up on their patents. All the blood work has also come up on their patents. 100% of the blood work has come up on their patents.
And what does that mean?
I think it means that somewhere like 14 organisms, 13 of them have been linked to Agraquest. I could be off by a couple organisms, but basically everyone but one is admitted to be there. Well, everyone but two is admitted to be there. Everyone but one has been proven to be there.
So Agraquest is patenting these materials which they're developing.
Well, either they're patenting it or it's in the screen as one of their agricultural pests already. Because you got to remember that Agraquest not only grows stuff on purpose to run through the screen, but Agraquest purposely has stock cultures that they keep around which are inside the screen. You know, you're going to have a pathogen of a plant, the decomposer, and that is purposely sustained and kept on site for future experiments on it.
Mm-hmm. Now, so you applied for workers' comp and you got the runaround as far as getting your forms and your work records and that kind of thing. And how long did this runaround last?
That runaround went on for 6 years, 5 or 6 years.
and they must have spent a lot of time fighting you, and you spent a lot of time fighting them to get your paperwork and to actually have a hearing.
Their lawyer spent a lot of time fighting me. The company just started ignoring me and not communicating with me and not cooperating with discovery issues. Once they got their worker comp lawyer, he became the mouthpiece for the company, even though he knew absolutely nothing about biology.
And you first wanted to find out who the insurance company was that was insured them for workers' comp, and who was that?
Well, the original form got submitted and it came back saying that the state board preferred employers was their insurer. And then the first lawyer told me they were uninsured, and I couldn't get a straight answer out of anybody, so I mailed in this form to San Francisco to find out who the true insurance company was. And it actually turned out to be Golden Eagle, which is also known as Liberty Mutual, down in San Diego.
And Liberty Mutual is owned by Warren Buffett?
Apparently so.
So we're talking about a major insurance company.
Big insurance company, and a lot more than just worker comp. They do property and casualty, and I think auto too.
And were you aware that Warren Buffett was chief of Schwarzenegger's kitchen cabinet and was involved in deregulating workers' comp in California?
I had no clue, but now I can see why. If he's running an insurance company, why not deregulate worker comp?
Do you think that that's part of your problem here, that this is deregulated and they can play games with you?
A large part of my problem was the difference between the old rules of worker comp and the new rules, and the fact that all they wanted to do was take all the old cases and just dismiss them or throw them out so then they could go under the new rules. So I definitely got stuck in a transitional period.
I see. Now, you were denied. What happened? Why did they deny your workers' comp claim?
First denial was statute of limitations, if I recall correctly.
Even though it wasn't your fault, they had stalled on providing information and that kind of thing.
Stalled. They completely deceived me. These people committed fraud.
How did they do that?
How'd they commit fraud? They still won't even give me the hazard list. Again, there's a thing called the Hazard Communication Program, which is cross-referenced by about 9 federal and state statutes. I have asked for the hazards that I have been exposed to repeatedly ever since I had filed the worker comp claim, and I have no answer. The only answer from them was their defense lawyer said that he was unaware of worker right to know laws, and even if they do exist, my request was overly broad. A brilliant piece of paper that I actually want to frame. Because if this guy who's doing worker comp does not know about federal HAZCOM laws, then why is he even a lawyer? He shouldn't be a lawyer. He should be in real estate law or something. He shouldn't be a worker comp.
Well, it sounds like he's being paid a lot of money to try to prevent liability for this company.
But the court actually bought into it. I'm actually watching the judge sit here watch this lawyer lie through his teeth, telling me he's unaware of these federal laws, which are advertised on every minimum wage board throughout the whole country. It says right there, you have a right to know the hazards in the workplace.
And the judge?
The judge bought into it and then told me that I could sit there right then and ask him questions specifically about organisms, and he could come back with a yes or a no. So I spit off like 8 of them off the top of my head, missed a couple of them. They came back with yes with virtually everything I asked. That was the only time I ever got to ask them things. So I get to ask him about 8 organisms when I know there were at least 10,000 things in that laboratory when I worked there, but we're going to talk about 8 of them. What about the other 9,992 of them? What were they? Are they human pathogens? Never got these answers.
So the judge denies your claim, workers' comp.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens?
Well, then I sent in a really long appeal with all the points of order as to what I thought was illegal about their judgment.
Mm-hmm.
They sent back a denial. Then I sent back in another appeal. And then they sent back a denial saying that I sent it to the wrong address. I didn't send it to San Francisco. I sent it to Sacramento. And by the time Sacramento had forwarded it to San Francisco, that I was over the amount of days that I was allotted for them to hear it.
So they stalled you again and then said you had exceeded your time limit to actually file an appeal.
Absolutely.
You think this was purposely done?
The whole thing looks pretty orchestrated from the beginning from what I've seen. I mean, when I sat there and watched the judge listen to the lies that this guy's spitting out, And then half of the meetings that we had over there were over the restraining order and cable television. I'm having motion discovery hearings trying to discuss hazards and figure out what was really there. So I finally have my preponderance of the evidence to prove that what I had in my body could have been caught at Agraquest. And we're arguing over this guy's little issues about cable television. That's all he wants to do. He said I demonstrated moral turpitude. I don't even know what that meant.
I see. Now, you appealed it. You finally got to another judge, or you were trying to get to another judge to appeal it. So what happened with that?
No, they got the first judge challenged out because she said that the insurance industry's lawyer was, or no, the insurance industry's doctor was known to be a liar.
This is the judge.
Yeah.
The first
So
judge
they challenged her out and got her off the case.
So they got her
real
removed
quick.
from the case because she said that the insurance company's lawyer was known to be
their doctor.
Their doctor was known to be a liar, and for that she was discharged.
She was booted off, and then what they did is they brought in a judge that was apparently a former defense attorney for Liberty Mutual.
And did she let you know about that when you were here? When she was
Absolutely
doing the hearing?
not.
So who was this judge? Susan.
Oh yeah, her name was Susan something.
So that's another example, in your view, of the kind of corruption that's going on in this workers' comp system, that a judge is actually ruling on your case who previously had worked for a law firm representing the insurance company, Liberty Mutual.
They're absolutely corrupt. Yeah, yeah. That's the way it plays out. During one of the motion to discoveries with this Daniel Wright guy spewing off his lies, they wanted to talk about cable TV. Well, I told them, fine, I'm done talking about cable TV. This is irrelevant. So I'll take the Fifth Amendment at this point. I'm not saying nothing. I'll plead the Fifth. She demanded that I answer the question or she would throw out my court case, and told me that the Fifth Amendment does not matter in the WCAB, that the entire Constitution of the United States of America and of California is irrelevant in her court. At that point, I started to wonder where I'm sitting. Am I sitting in America or not? The Constitution is irrelevant. She said the only thing we enforce here is labor code. That's why they don't enforce any of the health and safety standards, because the health and safety code is separate from labor code. Now, I know there's got to be a statute in labor code somewhere that marries labor code to health and safety code and holds it accountable. But
this
I'm not a lawyer.
It sounds like a catch-22, because to fight your case around workers' comp required showing what was going on with the labor regulations and that kind of thing. Yet this was prevented from being brought up in your case by this judge.
They didn't want to talk. No health and safety violations were admissible in their court. Labor code only. Any other law in America does not matter. Labor code only. And
you tried, and your mother tried, to go to all kinds of politicians. The district attorney, Dan Strosky of Yolo County, many people apparently, the insurance commissioner, Steve Posner. You visited these people, or they were contacted, and Senator Boxer, Senator Feinstein, the Attorney General of California, Jerry Brown, and the previous Attorney General. Did they ever call you and contact you?
No. No, it's not important to their campaign. And also, when it comes down to microbiology, unfortunately, it's over a lot of people's heads. A lot of people don't understand biology. So you're saying that the agencies, the politicians, the insurance commissioner, the fraud assessment commission, the agencies in California and nationally, which are responsible for oversight in this industry and workers' comp fraud, never tried to get in touch with you personally to get your story? No, the only government agency that ever called me back was APHIS, wanting to know why the employer was importing dirt without a permit. They wanted to know why they were smuggling. They're the only ones who call back. And APHIS is who? APHIS is FDA, USDA. I see. And they did call you? Oh yeah, they were real curious about soil smuggling in America, because this was right around that hoof and mouth disease over in Europe. And when you called OSHA to go in and check the place out, were you disappointed about first of all, how long did it take for OSHA to go in there and make the investigation? It took them 1.5 years to show up and make the investigation. In this biotech company? About a year and a half. They said they lost the paperwork. Then I finally called them up eventually and said, where's the report? Didn't you guys ever search? And they says, oh no, we already conducted the investigation. I'm sorry, you were supposed to get a copy of it. You were automatically supposed to get a copy of it. So they finally sent me a copy of it, and of course it's missing the report date, which hung them because they never sent it to me. So now the report date's missing from it.
I see. So you're struggling for justice to get your health care. And this fight, you know, basically is obviously not just an individual situation, but a problem of the system. Is that how you see it?
With the worker compensation system, it's broke. It's probably broke beyond repair. I mean, you've got an industry which is playing both sides of the field. You've got the state in the insurance industry as an actual insurance provider, and now you got the state running the court system at the same time. How's that going to work? That's conflict of interest. The state does not belong in the insurance industry.
Okay, thank you. Good talking to you and hope to have you again.
Thank you, Steve.